All right, question. I know you've played Skyrim because you made the Draugr reference last time we were recording.
Yes, I have.
When you start a game like Skyrim, where you have the option to be human or a bunch of other things, what do you typically do?
I never play as a human.
Right?
I never do.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what do they have? They have the Viashino equivalent.
My go-to is the Argonians, which
Yes, the
are
Argonians.
kind of the Viashino equivalent.
Yeah.
I have also played as a Khajiit before.
Yeah.
I will occasionally play as one of the various elf options. I think they have Dark Elf, and it's either High Elf or Wood Elf. They're like the, alternative option there. But honestly, yeah, playing as a human is always my bottom tier choice.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because if you've got all these other options.
Yeah, why would I want to... I'm playing a fantasy game.
Yep.
Why would I want to play as a human?
Yeah. Humans are the default. They're the vanilla.
Same with Mass Effect. Like, when I used to play... obviously when you do your character creation as Shepard, you have to play as Commander Shepard. But in Mass Effect 3, when they had the online multiplayer option, I never played as a person. I was always playing as a Solarian or literally anything else.
Yep. So, this is still a Magic channel.
It is.
But
we're not going to get into my video game hyperfixations today.
We're coming up on Bloomburrow,
Yes.
which is the second setting in Magic's history that has no humans.
Yep.
So it's kind of significant. So let's look back a little bit at the history of humans in the game.
Yeah.
At the beginning of Magic, in Alpha, there were a bunch of different creature types. It was a little haphazard what was differentiated between creature types. Like, I know before I've gone off about the lords. Like, one of them is just a lord. The Zombie Master is just a lord. But then Lord of Atlantis is summon Lord of Atlantis and everything. But there are a bunch of humans represented as cards.
And they're not typed as humans.
Right, they're just Banalish.
they are
Hero is summon hero.
shown to be humanoid.
The knights seem like humans and they're summon knight. The Northern Paladin, summon paladin. And then if you're not a human, you get whatever type of critter you are.
Yeah, like, are you a Pegasus? Are you a zombie? Are you a falcon token that Soraya made?
But then like merfolk or goblins, that kind of thing, those are things you could construe as having a more of a job.
Yeah.
Rather than a what are you? But they were all a merfolk is a merfolk and a goblin is a summon goblin. And that's just the way the game worked in the beginning. But eventually we get to this real critical point after a bunch of little incremental changes where they switched to every creature having multiple types and basically following the D&D system, which is class and race and class. And they started that kind of in earnest, trying to do that with most creatures in Mirrodin. So that's the first time that they introduced also the human creature type.
Yeah, like, this is a human.
So if you scroll through the Mirrodin card file, you see human soldiers and cat knight and all of these race class groupings. And the articles on class on the wiki and that sort of thing, and even this big article on the Grand Creature Type update from 2007 refer to Mirrodin as being the time they started doing that. But that's actually not entirely accurate, and this is probably splitting hairs, but if you go back to the previous block, like Onslaught, they had a bunch of creatures that they gave a class and a race into class, like Bird Soldier, Avid Brigadier. But all the humans there were still not creature human. There's like Ancestor's Prophet is a cleric lord. They did a lot of things using multiple subtypes on there, but still they would never...
It's not spelled out, this is a human.
Yep, they specifically avoided it.
Yeah. And then until we get to Mirrodin, where we see that a lot.
Yeah. And this is a point where I'm so frustrated that a couple of years ago, Wizards purged the bulk of articles they've ever published on the Mothership website.
Yeah, that's really frustrating when you try to go back and find that. It's just broken links. And,
so many. And so I am fairly certain that they announced over that period of years, I think I recall reading articles where they're like saying, we're adding race and class to the Bird Soldier and everything. It seems like that was a big deal, but all that, traces of that are long gone. I'm pretty sure there were some references to there being a big debate about we don't want humans to be a supported type. We don't want people building human decks because that's kind of boring. And there's also, like right now, there's 3,700 humans, and the next most popular creature types are like elves with 630 or goblins with around 500. There's like 7 times as many humans as everything else. So I can understand why wizards would be reluctant to get the ball rolling on that.
Yeah.
And I think humans is a modern archetype.
Yes.
But it hasn't taken over the game. And Rosewater acknowledges that in an article when Innistrad was coming out, saying, we've decided to make a humans archetype. And that's the first time they actually did that, because in that case, humans were one of the 5
And that makes sense when you have the very monster movie, vampires, werewolves, zombies versus humans kind of theme going on.
Yeah, so it
but
makes it...
in general, I tend to agree with that. I don't really want Magic to be a game that's like very human focused when we have all these other options. Like, humans can be there, I guess, but I don't want them to be the stars.
Yeah. And then so it's kind of ironic then when they got to Lorwyn, which is that first plane, that first set of, well, it's not a block, it's 2 mini blocks, but that first mega block set on Lorwyn/Shadowmoor. I guess it's worth explaining briefly for anyone who wasn't playing the game, isn't familiar. Lorwyn and Shadowmoor are the same place. One is like the sunny, happy version, and then the Great Aurora happens, and for the next 300 years it's Shadowmoor, and then it flips back for another 300 years between
it's not the same, but I always liken that in my head to Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past, when you can go back and forth through the portals and go into the Shadow World, even though that's kind of time travel, but it's...
I was going to say the Upside Down, which is also
that,
not exactly, because it doesn't exist at the same time.
It's not quite the same, but it I think it makes sense in my head because it is the same world, but things are different. So we're seeing it's almost like a weird mirror, bizarro version of the place we're already familiar with. And I like how they did that, because we see some of the same creatures represented in different ways.
Yeah. That's really cool, but I'm getting way off track.
We're getting
the
off track.
point of that is that was the first time that they did a no human set.
No humans.
Ostensibly, that's because they were trying to do a Celtic mythology theme, and so they wanted to focus on these other creature types and do a really creature type based block. So that was the idea. There's these 8 creature types instead of 10, each of which are kind of spread over multiple colors. And there are no humans around to muddy up the waters to take up slots in the card file, and so they can get all the spots there. And there are also weird type synergy where like the Kithkin and the goblins would help each other and things like that. It's interesting that we haven't had another non-human set since 2007.
Haven't revisited that concept.
But I found a pretty recent quote from Rosewater actually saying that was the worst selling set. The Lorwyn-Shadowmoor was the worst selling set in quite a long period of time. So that probably has to do with it.
That could have something to do with that decision.
Yeah. But I mean, recently we saw Kamigawa come back and be wildly popular, which revitalized a set that Rosewater has also described as one of the worst selling,
Historically, that was I was not playing at that time, but from what I understand historically, like, that was not a good performing set for Wizards. So, as much as we don't always like to get into that, Wizards is, well, Hasbro, I guess, is running a business, and so things that don't sell well tend to not be repeated.
Yep. So that's all just a little bit of background. And I just wanted to kind of talk about the possibilities of what we're going to see in this set, mainly storytelling-wise. And I don't think we can actually predict too much. That's what I kind of intended to talk about today, and initially was, let's predict but that's kind of ridiculous. Instead, I kind of want to look at similar settings in other fiction.
Okay.
And just explore the possibilities of what kind of thing we might see, what we should be on the lookout for.
All right.
Story-wise. And I think we don't necessarily have to start with other settings that are purely animals or non-humans. It's also useful to look at fantasy and sci-fi where humans are just one of many species, races. And in those settings, I feel like we, the audience, are typically supposed to identify with the humans. they're us. They're our perspective, and often we'll follow them as the narrator.
Yeah, like they'll be the POV character, or they're the ones who are leading us through this fiction.
Very frequently then, other species or other races are used to contrast what it is to be human. Sometimes favorably, usually unfavorably. I mean, a lot of times you'll see the elves are the caretakers of nature, showing us how bad we are at that. And that's kind of the sort of relationship I think we typically have with other races. They'll frequently be archetypes or caricatures of a philosophy, like Mass Effect.
Yeah.
Like, what do you see there?
Let me consider that. I mean, from what I remember, it has been a while since I played the game. I remember the Solarians being kind of, like, if we're likening it to Magic, like the mono blue faction a little bit. Like, they're all about the knowledge, they're all about science, but kind of at the expense of more emotional connection. Like, I remember them getting it... You cannot romance Mordin in Mass Effect. That does not mean I didn't try. I actually I talked to him so many times that he actually gave me I'm letting you down easy talk, which I don't know if you all know that, but if you talk to him enough times, eventually he will tell you that he is not into humans, but if he were, you would be at the top of the list.
That's really nice.
And I was like, wow, thank you, Mordin.
It's legitimately really nice that they thought to put that in there.
Yeah, I mean, they obviously knew some of us were going to attempt to do that.
That's amazing.
And they kind of get it. I remember at some point in those many conversations, they talk about how the Solarians, like, they don't really do romance. That's not really a thing. Like, they have a very, I mean, obviously they reproduce, but they take a very, like, clinical approach to it. It's like, hey, I need someone to fertilize these eggs. And it's like, cool. Like, we would be a good genetic match. Let's do that. And so they're kind of that sort of caricature of extremism. Like, we're completely divorced from emotion. Yeah. Like, they're all very scientific. They're very interested in the pursuit of knowledge. But then you also kind of get into some other things that they did, like to the Krogans, that were, not so great for... I don't know how much if we want to get into spoilers, but for a game that's been out for years.
Yeah. We should also probably bring it back to Magic at some point.
We should come back to Magic. But yeah, like, I could definitely see that as, like, they're that sort of caricature. And then you have, like, the Krogans, who are I kind of think of them as, like, the mono red. Like, they're very...
emotion-driven.
Emotion-driven. They're the more warfare-focused group of aliens. And, of course, as the human player, you end up becoming pals with all of these various aliens. My personal favorite is in the third game. I think it was the third game when they they resurrect the ancient alien. And I cannot think of his name right now. He was one of the Protheans. Because you played all of the games, right?
I did, but I do not remember this character.
So
at least by name.
What is his name? Javik. They resurrect him from he was in this, like, stasis chamber. And so he's one of the Protheans, and it was really interesting because we've had them built up through the games to this point as this kind of idealized race of entities that created all of these very high-tech things. And, like, wow, these people must be so... beyond us. And, like, Liara had spent her whole life studying them, and then she meets him, and he is such a jerk. I took him on every mission because he had something snarky to say about every single race. Like, we go to the Solarian science base, and he's like, I remember when they used to eat flies. And just, like, he has something really snooty to say everywhere you go, and you're just like, wow, Javik, like, can you shut up? You're really, everyone's so excited to meet you, and that's why you shouldn't meet your heroes sometimes. But anyhow.
And I guess that still is an example of sort of the type of thing I'm talking where the other species is kind of just there as an example of a type of human. Yeah,
they're all kind of mirrors of things that we see in each other. Sometimes that is extreme, or I think sometimes that's used in I don't know the best way to say this, but we're not that different actually sort of storyline where you meet this very physically different looking alien and then come to find out, like, oh, we actually have a lot of the same traits. I also say snarky things in unfamiliar social settings. So yeah, I think that's having a set where you take the human element out is a very interesting way to approach storytelling, because we are very used to that, at least especially in Western culture. Most of our stories, if they have non-human characters, they're not the default. Like, we have... we're experiencing the story with other humans or somewhere in there, so completely removing them... Like,
so if you take the humans out, who's the surrogate? Who are you supposed to identify with, who you're supposed to follow?
Looking, like, whose eyes are we seeing this through? Who are we supposed to be experiencing this with?
And it'll be interesting to see if the... world building, the storytelling tries to give us a clear answer to that, or not. And
maybe they don't. Maybe they're just like, here you go.
Yeah, we experience magic a little differently because it's not a linear story.
Right.
They tend to publish linear stories with it, but that's not the whole deal. We experience the cards. We start out usually seeing the flavor text on 1 or 2 cards. I mean, we've been looking at Mabel for months now, and a few of these other characters, Bria. And they showed us, we talked about this a few months ago when we looked at the everything that's been previewed.
Yeah, we did the Bloomburrow predictions video a while back.
And there isn't really flavor text here, but they give us these little snippets of information in the presentations, and then we find out more as we go, and eventually read the stories. But we typically got a bunch of different perspectives, and given the tendency to have side stories as well now, we'll probably have a main storyline that follows Mabel, most likely. She seems to be put forth as the protagonist.
Like the protagonist.
I think Rosewater probably explicitly told us that.
At some point. That was probably mentioned somewhere. I can't remember where. I can't point out the quote, but I feel like, Mabel's...
We'll likely also get side stories with some other characters who may not have anything to do with that.
Yeah.
But then talking about settings where there are no humans, I was researching for this episode on TV tropes and found a good term, xeno-fiction.
Okay.
And it wasn't presented as a spectrum there, but I think it sort of is a useful model to think of that as one end of a spectrum.
Okay.
And the real pivotal statement there is, if you can replace the non-humans with humans without too much trouble, it's probably not xeno-fiction.
Okay. Got it.
And they actually used a lot of, despite saying xeno, most of the examples are either about anthropomorphized animals or toys. Like Toy Story is an example they give of xeno-fiction.
Yeah.
It's actually pretty much toward the xeno-fiction end of the spectrum, because the concerns of those characters are not really mirrors of what we humans experience.
Like we're experiencing, they're
worried about breaking
toy-centric society. Yeah. Okay. Okay, I see what you mean. So, like, it's something where you could easily swap out humans and still kind of tell the same story.
Other end of the spectrum, Disney's Robin Hood.
Yeah.
Where you've literally taken a story about humans and just, you have animals instead. Yeah. And there's a little bit of symbolism in that the bad guys are portrayed by predators.
Or like Great Mouse Detective, like, it's taking the Sherlock Holmes story and it has swapped it out for rodents. So. Okay.
But I think Rats of Nim is a little bit more in the middle, because they're explicitly acknowledging humans have a society. We know about them.
We're aware of them.
We're kind of becoming like them. And but they also have their own concerns based on their size relative to the world and,
there was
the fact that humans exist.
What was that movie? Over the Hedge was kind of like that, where it's the, like, raccoon, like, possums and little, like, not wild animals, like wild animals in that they're not domesticated, but like animals that would live in a neighborhood, like trying to sneak around and get food, and they very much see human society on the outskirts of that, but their concerns are related to their existence within that world. Yeah. So that would be kind of in that, like, kind of a middle of the road. Yeah. We're exploring some distinctly non-human concerns within a world where humans are still acknowledged. But
even in the most extreme examples of those, we tend to at least have language present, which is completely just not realistic. I mean, if I was to sit down and say, I'm going to write the most xeno-fiction thing I could, it would probably be a story where I'm following the perspective of an animal and has no language, and I can describe the impulses they have, but it wouldn't make a good story, because...
You know what it is?
What?
So when they were making the Dark Crystal, there is a cut where Jim Henson filmed a portion of like the Skeksis dinner where there is no dialogue. It's just Skeksis noises for like 20 minutes. And apparently that did not test well with audiences and got cut. But yeah, that would be a curious, but maybe not well-loved story if we just completely removed the language element and we're like, no, we're going to experience raw animal existence.
Yeah. I think games actually are probably much better at representing that kind of thing. And this, I know this is a stupid example, but Goat Simulator.
Yeah,
Goat Simulator?
I haven't played it, but I've watched some Let's Plays of it.
It's a wildly unrealistic representation of, like, goat anatomy?
Yeah.
But it doesn't burden you down with like words
it's
or
not
anything.
Philosophical.
Yeah, you just have the ability to interact with your world in some ways, and then you go do that.
Yeah.
And it seems like a lot of isn't Stray also a pretty success? I haven't played that, but I think
from what I have watched of it, you are playing as a cat,
right?
But you are interacting with. There is a lot more language, and it's a little bit less of that. But yeah, I've actually wanted to make a spider simulator game that would involve you playing as a spider. And that would be the whole game, really. Yeah. Just like building your web or nest, depending on the type of spider you're playing as, and then going about your spider tasks. Anyhow.
Yeah. Really having problems staying focused.
We're not doing well on the focus today.
But what I expect, we know explicitly, have been told that there is a creature type associated with each color pair.
Yes.
So we're going to have
the
10 pairs. And this goes back to why I wanted to talk about settings where you do have humans, but you also have all these other things. Because I kind of expect each creature type to have its own philosophy, its own identity, because that's what we already do with Magic and the color pie anyway.
I think that makes sense that that's going to be seen here as well.
So if we're already dividing up the game in like, here's the ambitious color, here's the cooperative color, then we're probably just going to do that with more granularity. And I expect to see stories about the little mice overcoming their diminutive size and being able to repel predators much larger than them, and that sort of thing. I figure we might also have stories about overcoming the divisions between different classes.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that.
We sort of have, in Ravnik and that sort of thing, we have the guilds, and those are similar to caste or class systems. I mean, those discussions already come up, or those themes are already present in Ravnica.
That's a very common thing throughout many stories, is these sort of us versus them, different, looking at different values that various groups either share or do not share.
So I think the design of Magic will make it easy to lean into that sort of theme.
I could see that for sure. And then I think with animals especially, we have kind of a blueprint almost for, like you were saying, like prey versus predator animals. Like, oh, what if we're in a story where like these two have to cooperate in a situation where normally they would be very adversarial, or maybe even like their interaction might even be fatal in a lot of cases.
And we also have stereotypes about some types of animals, like raccoons or bandits, right?
Yeah.
Some animals are known to steal.
Yeah, foxes are tricksy.
Yeah. And so it might be that they explore, okay, these are different ethical systems.
Yeah. And I could see that, or they could also do some unexpected stuff and show them in unexpected roles, like kind of challenging our own views about culturally, like what we expect for raccoons or... certain types of animals, maybe being, I don't know, like maybe there's a raccoon cleric he's like a priest or something.
Yeah. I mean, it's possible they will attempt to do nothing ambitious whatsoever and just give us a bunch of cute animals, and I would still love that. I
would be okay with that too.
But
I like to imagine what could happen, though.
Yeah, I think it would be neat if some of these themes kind of show up at some level, and I wouldn't be surprised if they do, even if they're not the focus. I would expect, a bit of flavor text here or there, or a side story to do something with this, though. It seems, especially with side stories, when Wizards lets their authors just run with things. And that's why I love the side stories from Brothers War so much. They had a world and a story that had to fit things in, but it seems like they just let the authors tell a good story there, and they knocked it out of the park there. And so I'm hoping we'll get that kind of thing here.
I hope so too. I think that I'm really excited for this set. I'm really excited for Duskmourn. There's a lot of stuff coming up in the immediate future that I'm very, very excited to see. So.
I am excited for both those things as well, but I just read the news today that there is going to be slightly less than 2 months before the release of Bloomburrow and the release of Duskmourn. And that frustrates me so badly. I want more time with the cute animals.
I would like more time as well. I've actually, this is probably a topic for another video, but I think I have been feeling a little bit of the product fatigue of there's just so much stuff coming out so quickly that I've been struggling to keep up with a lot of it. And that's made me kind of feel there's a little bit of futility of like, oh, well, like, how much time do I want to spend on this when there's going to be something new next week? You know?
I'm finding that I'm mostly bowing out of Modern Horizons 3 Limited because it's not a set that I intuitively clicked with at first, and I'm finding it's really not worth investing the time to get over that hump when Bloomburrow's coming so soon and I'm so much more enthusiastic.
Yeah, it's right around the corner. So,
so I'm just kind of, I'm not playing, but I'm kind of taking a break. I'm playing a lot more of my standard skeletons. And that's fun. I'm getting a little bit,
I'll often find that where just like I'll start spending more and more time on other things. Like I've been more commander focused lately. Probably because of that. I'm like, well, you know, how much time do I want to invest in like really getting into all this when 2 months later we're gonna be in a whole new place.
But in Bloomburrow, it'll be all of the time. I will give all my time and all of my money. I'm not committing to that, but you know it's gonna happen.
Yes.
So,
I am very excited for Bloomburrow. I think this is good. This has been I mean, hopefully I'll love it because Outlaws of Thunder Junction was, for me, the unexpected favorite set so far. Where I was like, oh my god, I love this, and was not expecting to. Like, went into this kind of like, whatever. So I'm really hoping that Bloomburrow will be exciting for me because I have all this hype for it. I would hate to get there and be like, oh, I don't actually like this. Like, how disappointing would that be?
Hopefully Wizards is just on such a roll that they just overshoot our expectations every time.
I hope so. I'm just like, I have building so much hype up for it.
I want to believe.
You know, I do believe. I think it's going to be... I mean, as much as I love animals, I think it's going to be pretty hard for them to ruin it for me. You know? Like, they'd have to actively try to, like, make a bad set for me to not enjoy it, I think.
It's going to be awesome. It's going to be awesome.
Like, they would have to backdraft their own set, is what I'm saying.